America Emboldened presence, reclaim ground media. An interview.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a very special recording of Reclaimed Ground Media tonight, where we are so lucky to have, I guess it is former U.S. AG to Delaware, Julianne Murray, here for an exclusive interview where we can kind of pick her brain to see exactly what happened so the common everyday person can understand what's happening here in the state and to kind of figure out why she thinks it did happen.
Well, looking forward to doing this interview with you, Katie. As you just stated, I guess we'll bring her up. Our guest today is Julianne Murray. She is the former chair of the Delaware Republican Party, and she was appointed by President Donald Trump earlier this year to serve as the acting United States Attorney for the District of Delaware. Her tenure drew national attention amid legal and political disputes over interim federal prosecutor appointments, Senate confirmation norms, and the balance of power between the executive branch, the courts, and Congress. We're going to talk about some of that tonight, hopefully. Those tensions intensified following legal challenges surrounding the appointment of Trump attorney Alina Habba in New Jersey. And that raised broader questions about the legality and durability of an interim United States attorney appointment that was made without a Senate confirmation. So earlier this month, as many people may have seen, Julianne Murray posted this, citing her concerns about legal uncertainty surrounding interim appointments, what she describes an increasingly politicized confirmation process. While she has emphasized that her decision was not about a single case, the legal challenges that were tied to Habba appointment underscored the instability of the current framework and contributed to her conclusion that continuing under those conditions could undermine the integrity of the office. So today, we're going to talk about how she views the legality of her appointment, what this moment says about the future federal prosecutions, and the institutional norms that are out there. Julianne Murray, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We're very happy for you to be here with us tonight. We're very grateful for your time today, too. Yeah. I know it's probably very busy for you right now.
It's a little less busy than it was, but I will tell you, Friday, just, with the resignation and the statement going out. And it has been, when I looked on Saturday and saw how many views there were of the statement on X, I was blown away. We were well over 1.5 million. And it blew me away. And my father actually lives in Arizona. And is not a Trump fan, which is even funnier. He texted me, he said, "Oh, you've made the big time. You're on page A2 of the Washington Post." Awesome. Yeah, not where I want to be, but no, I'm happy to be here and to kind of talk through it because it's, a lot of people don't understand it, and I'm happy to kind of explain it.
Sure. One of the things that I want to kind of put out there at the beginning, and then if I get this wrong, please try to correct me on the blue slip process.
No problem.
Because I was trying to figure out, how do you describe this to the average person? And
right.
So at the center of this controversy, if I'm correct, there's the Senate blue slip, and our two senators, Lisa Blunt Rochester and Senator Chris Coons, basically made it known that they were not going to give the blue slip confirmation for you. The blue slip is a kind of a long-standing Senate tradition that goes back over a century. When a president nominates someone to serve as a United States attorney or a federal judge in a specific state, the Senate Judiciary Committee sends a blue slip to each of that state's 2 U.S. senators. Those senators then can either return that blue slip in support, return it in opposition, or they can decline to return it at all. And so while this blue slip is not written into law or into our Constitution, from my understanding, the Judicial Committee has historically treated it as a withheld or negative blue slip halts a nomination. Is that an accurate description for the listeners tonight?
It is. And the only thing that I would add to that, which is a nuance that people talked about in this, is that because of how the process works, the administration reaches out to the senators before they nominate in order to find out. Because they don't want to basically send a nomination and then have it fail. So people have made much ado. Well, she wasn't nominated. Well, I wasn't nominated because they knew I wasn't going to get the blue slips. So there's a chicken and egg that happens on that. But you are absolutely correct in what people don't understand is that the Judiciary Committee happens first before the Senate. So people say, well, it's a Republican Senate. Why couldn't you get through? I couldn't get to the Senate because of the Judiciary Committee, and I couldn't get to the Judiciary Committee because I couldn't get the blue slip. So it's just kind of this domino effect.
That makes sense. Thank you for explaining that, because I just was kind of curious about that. I guess to start off maybe tonight with the interview, I kind of laid the framework of this challenge with Alina Habba in New Jersey. Can you maybe just tell us about what led to your decision, what led up to this, and the conversations, if you're allowed to share them, about your reasoning to leave this from the integrity of ongoing investigations? Kind of curious if you can lead us into there.
Sure, absolutely. And it's buckle up. I mean, it's a story, in terms of, all right, so when I was appointed, so first of all, many people don't know this. I actually met with President Trump. I'm one of the few U.S. attorneys. I actually sat across the desk from him in the Oval Office and was hired on the spot when I met with him. Because of the political climate at the time, so this was June, Senate confirmations were lagging. They asked if I would come in as an interim U.S. attorney, which is an actual appointment from the AG, technically, for 120 days. And within that 120 days, you have to either get Senate confirmed, nominated and Senate confirmed, or the court can hold you over. The district court for the district can hold you over under what's called 546D. And it's a prerogative that they have that basically, if the office is, quote, vacant because the interim period runs out, they can, may is how it reads, appoint a U.S. attorney. So historically, there's lots of U.S. attorneys that did not go through Senate confirmation. It would get to the court, and because for political reasons, the senators for some reason didn't want to give a blue slip because of the optics of opposite party or something like that. It would get to the court, and the court would then give the nod, and that person is able to continue on as the U.S. attorney until the president appoints somebody else, which could be years. I mean, there's people that have been there for years and years. So what happened with Alina is that the senators, blue New Jersey, wouldn't even interview. Like, there was nothing happening there with the blue slips. And the court also declined to hold her over. And they did something that had never been done before. They brought their own person in. So historically, the 546D, the court would either say yay or nay to the person that was chosen by the president and sitting there. New Jersey, for the very first time, basically said, we're going to, and they grabbed what was called the first assistant from her office and named that person as the U.S. attorney. Well, the Trump administration looked at that and said, you just went into the executive branch. The judiciary just crossed into the executive branch, and they fired her immediately. Okay, so now we have a vacancy. So what they did is they made Alina that first assistant. And the reason they did that is under what's called the FVRA. That is a law that provides for acting officials. And in the context of the Department of Justice, the first assistant becomes the acting U.S. attorney when the U.S. attorney is vacant. So like when I came on board in July, one of the civil chief in my office had been the acting until I got there because it was vacant. So that framework of, and they call it the FAUSA, the first assistant United States attorney, FAUSA, was the first time that they had done that. It was creative, in terms of they named her as the FAUSA and then said, okay, she's the acting U.S. attorney. That happened. I had been in probably 6 weeks, maybe right around, I think it was probably end of August. I don't remember, but I remember thinking, okay, cool. This will all be worked out by the time it gets to me, which is November 10th. And then in September here in Delaware, our court put out an order on middle of September that basically said, Julianne Murray has not been nominated and confirmed. We're about 6 weeks out, 2 months out from the end of her term. We're seeking applications, basically. And so I've had people say, when did you know you had a problem? I'm like, well, when the court issued an order soliciting for the job that I was sitting in, I had a pretty good indication that there was going to be a problem. And, but still, I mean, I buckled down and just kind of wanted to continue on. So that's kind of how they intertwine. So basically, when I got to the end of my term, which was November 10th, about November 6th or thereabouts, the court declined to carry me over. So we knew I was not going to get carried over. I still had not been nominated. Could have been, but at this point, I interviewed with the senators on, it was the last week of October. And actually, we can talk about that separately. Thought it was a really good interview. I mean, that's a whole nother story. But basically, once we were coming into November 10, that Friday before on November 7th, I resigned as the interim U.S. attorney, was then named as my first assistant, Ben Wallace, who is now the U.S. attorney, was moved over out of the FAUSA role so that I could occupy it. He became what's called the executive assistant United States attorney. I became the FAUSA, and then I was named as the acting U.S. attorney. While this happened, the Third Circuit argument had happened. So Alina, at the district court level, we knew that was going to be not in favor of the administration. The Third Circuit argument was right around October 20th. So we knew that a decision was coming, probably within a month or so. And anybody, candidly, who listened to the Third Circuit argument, I mean, I listened to it and I went, yeah, we got a problem. I mean, so it's, you could tell with the questions that they were asking and how it was going. So I was concerned even from the minute I was named as acting. Before I was named as acting, I actually delegated everything that I could to my FAUSA, to my chiefs, so that I was not signing things, so that I was not going to jeopardize any of the prosecutions that were coming out of my office. Because what was happening in the other districts, every district except Delaware, was defendants were suing, saying that the United States attorney was not validly appointed. And if that person is not validly appointed, everything that flows from there is therefore illegal or must be thrown out. So we actually did not have one of those challenges. And then Third Circuit opinion comes out. So on Monday, right after Thanksgiving, that opinion comes out. Alina and I spoke to each other, and basically, because we're both in the Third Circuit, and for both of us, it was like, okay, I mean, this is, yes, it can be appealed. But the problem is appeals take time. And it wasn't our call to make the appeal. I mean, that's a Department of Justice decision, whether they're going to do that or not. But for both of us, it was really, okay, like this is now a problem for the office. And she resigned. I took a little bit of a different path. We didn't do it together, and somewhat on purpose, I would say. It was, she said to me, she was actually very kind. She goes, "You don't really want to be in the same headline with me." I was like, "Well, that's a fair point."
That's nice.
Yeah. But also what happened was, because I was so concerned that we were going to be challenged in Delaware, I actually voluntarily reached out to the Department of Justice. It was the Wednesday out. So the decision happens Monday, Wednesday. I'm reaching out saying, look, if the court is willing to hold over Ben, then that gives you guys a U.S. attorney. I'm out. That gives stability to the office, because he will be there as long as the president wants and doesn't appoint somebody else. He's been with the office since 2023. He has a hell of a resume. He's a good guy, and we were actually a really good team, because he could be inward facing, prosecutorial, experience, and I could be outward facing, which was the PR side of it, educating people about what the U.S. Attorney's Office does. I wanted to increase federal prosecutions into Sussex County. I was at like the policy management level. And so it was basically reach out, find out if the court will accept Ben. And if they will, I resign. And ultimately, it took a couple days, but ultimately, right, got back, and that was acceptable. And because I didn't want to be rushed into figuring out, I shut down my law practice. Like, I went all in on this, and I wasn't quite sure where what I wanted to do. I then said, okay, let us switch places. Make me the executive assistant United States attorney. Make him the court will hold, make him the United States attorney, and I can help bridge the gap. Basically, there were things that I brought to the U.S. Attorney's Office in terms of the relationships with local law enforcement that the U.S. Attorney's Office has never had, and it's because of the relationships that I garnered when I ran for Attorney General in 22. So it was a very natural fit when I became the U.S. Attorney. That all the law enforcement was like, yay, and we were able to really build some coalitions and put local and county and state and federal all in the same room talking about gun cases and things. And so I really want to make sure that continues on. And while I took Ben with me everywhere and introduced him, I want to show the support by staying there and not just taking my toys and walking away because I'm not the U.S. Attorney anymore. It's very important for me to see this through from an integrity standpoint and just make sure that the office continues with what we started.
Julianne, that brings kind of a couple different questions. You've answered actually several of my questions already in that, so I appreciate that.
Done this a time or two, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. Do you think, from a lawful standpoint, in your opinion, if you're able to give this, do you think that the Department of Justice, when they maneuvered to reclassify you as acting, putting that in quotes, U.S. Attorney, after the judicial non-reappointment was lawful, do you think that what they've done as far as, is it defensible as they've challenged it? Do you think that
yes.
There's been okay.
Yes, it is.
Okay. I think that's important for people to hear that you support what they've decided. Because not having this as a constitutional written part where I can, that's where I thrive. I can say whether or not something's constitutional. I know my constitution inside and out. But this is an area where I'm going, well, there's judicial precedence on this, but there's not constitutional law, so to speak, on it. So I was very curious for that.
Well, and there's two different statutes that kind of intermingle. So the 546 that I'm talking about, the United States Code, 546A is where a U.S. attorney or an attorney general can appoint a U.S. attorney. 546D, is where the court can hold over. The FVRA is I don't have it, 3345 or something like that. I don't know, some section, But if you Google FVRA, it's all over the place. But they're two totally different things, but there is a world where they can have interplay. And that is what the Department of Justice, when they came up with this, it had not happened. But that doesn't, I do think that there was a basis in this. I do.
Okay. And then you mentioned kind of the partisan side of politics within all this and your previous run for Attorney General. How much do you feel that your involvement in local politics here in Delaware has hurt you with your senators, Blunt Rochester and Chris Coons? Do you think that this is a decision because you were appointed by Donald Trump in your previous history in supporting kind of more MAGA principles? Do you think that kept them from really seeing the good that you were doing? Or what do you think went into their decision making?
That's a fair question. And I think that it is, I do not think my prior runs hurt me. I think that if anything, and so in terms of the interview, so Senator Coons and Blunt Rochester put out an announcement soliciting applications back in April. Saying that they were looking for people that they could then recommend to the president, kind of the backwards of what typically the administration picks who they want, but fine, we'll play that game. I went ahead, put my name in because I realized that if I didn't, that they would then there's not a million, they would never consider me. They would say I didn't participate. So I put my name in. That was beginning of May. Didn't hear anything. And then I'm appointed. I meet with the president in June. I'm actually appointed in July, and I'm going to say first or second week of August, I get an email asking me to interview with an interview commission that was put together by the senators. And it's, I'm kind of looking at this and I was like, I am the sitting U.S. attorney. Okay. you guys want me to interview. And so I actually decided to do it because and wasn't sure. And I will tell you, it was a fair interview. This is with the interview commission. It was also fair with the senators, but with the interview commission, it was 3 attorneys, not bipartisan at all. I'm not going to pretend for a second it was bipartisan. But I was, as I am with, I'm very much who I am. Talked about the office, talked about what my priorities were. And I actually came out of that interview going, okay, that was fair. There were no gotchas in there. Okay, I'm all right. Then fast forward in time, and I'm going to say middle of October, I get another email that says, okay, you're now, you've made it to an interview with the senators. And so that was that, I think it was October 27th. It was that Monday of that last week. And I met with both of them at the same time, and then they had their general counsels with them. So there were 4 people, but the senators were the ones who were taking point on this, and me. And it was about an hour, and it was actually a really good conversation. Just kind of, I felt like it was fair. There were the questions that I fully expected. That you don't have any prosecutorial experience. I was like, it doesn't matter. I did criminal defense. That is the flip side of the same coin. And oh, by the way, if you've done criminal defense, you can prosecute all day long because you've deconstructed something in criminal defense. Prosecutors can't necessarily become criminal defense people because criminal defense is about the pitch. You got to win the jury over. There's things there that that are different on the criminal defense side of things. And I said, so I do not accept that the fact that I do not have prosecutorial experience is a hindrance because this job is a managerial job. This, the structure that is set up in a U.S. attorney's office is there's the first assistant. There's a criminal chief, there's a civil chief, there's an appellate chief. These are all seasoned prosecutors that are managing the line AUSAs. So the job of the United States attorney is to not screw that up, let them do what they do. But also to, you're allowed to set priorities if you want to. You also have the job of following DOJ and administration priorities. So for instance, immigration is obviously a priority of this administration. So as the U.S. Attorney's Office, you're going to carry that out. But I felt like, in terms of the interview, talking through my experience, I don't believe that it actually that we talked about my run like per se. Like I everybody knows it, so I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. But one of the things that I did highlight was that Kathy Jennings and I actually worked together really well. When I got into this position, we had a meeting very early on where, it was her assistant, my assistant, and the 2 of us. And I looked and I said, I always address the elephant in the room, and everybody just kind of went, oh, good God, what is she going to say? And I said, we ran against each other and it was ugly. And now we're on the same team. Everybody is going to watch us. They're going to want to see, if we, how we behave and can we work together, and we have to. And she agreed. And so when I started Gun Offenders of Lower Delaware, GOLD, which was the prosecutorial, priority of prosecuting gun offenses, even in Sussex County, she was right there. Like we partnered on this. And so I made a point in the interview of saying to the senators, I said, so, this is beautiful. This is what is so great about Delaware is that we're supposed to be able to work together. I have demonstrated that I'm not partisan. There has not been a single political inkling, out of my office. We have stayed, true to what our mandate is. We are improving public safety. We're doing everything we're supposed to. And oh, by the way, the person I ran against is okay with me in this job. Like that to me said, you're doing a good job, Julianne, because, and so all of that was kind of part of this, and of course I was asked the question that you would fully expect I would be asked, which is, well, if you were told, to do something by the president or the attorney general that, that you thought was, did not believe had a basis in fact, would you, what would you do? I knew that question was coming. And, and my response was, well, I wouldn't do it. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm 55. I have a life after this. And in Delaware, being a member of the Delaware bar is a big deal.
Yep.
And there is a way that that there's just a way that you care. And, and I'm not, your reputation is everything. And I am not going to do something to jeopardize that. And if it is, political suicide for me to say that, then it is. But I'm, and I think that the senators were a little surprised. And I said, but listen, I firmly believe I was put here because I do have a strong personality. I will push back. No one is going to this is my district. And nobody is going to push me around. And that includes, I honest to God believe, having talked to President Trump personally, if I had a problem with something, like if there were a line of communication that came to me and I had a problem with it, that I could push back. And, I do believe that. And, he actually likes the pushback and the, and the challenge. He surrounds himself with people who challenge. Now, I'm not talking about being insubordinate, but I'm talking about just, kind of thinking outside the box and pushing in different ways, and the question was, well, if, ultimately, would you quit over it? Yeah, I would. And so I walk out of that interview. At the end of it, Senator Coons particularly said, he goes, you've worked really hard to get here. Yeah, I have. And you're passionate. Yeah, I am. Like, I'm glad you can see that. But I walked out of there kind of going, okay, that was not terrible by any stretch. Sure. I actually felt like it was, a positive interview. And that I had a chance at that point that that they would return the blue slips. And then why do I think they didn't? I can tell you that when the article that came out right before Thanksgiving, where Senator Coons went public about it, he said that the interview was appropriate, constructive, and respectful. I would agree with that characterization, but that because of things that had happened, specifically with the Trump administration and some of the U.S. attorneys in other states, they were going to decline to return a blue slip. And I read this and I thought, so it's not about me. It's not my performance. If he had a problem with what I have done in the job from a performance standpoint, say it. Right. If it was an issue that I didn't have enough experience or something like that, easy to say, but none of that is what was said. What was said was, she's a Trump girl. And, and I'm not, I'm not okay with that. And almost like, as a, because, as I'm going to use the word punishment to kind of the Trump administration, we're not going to do this. Now, what's ludicrous about that is that the very next paragraph says, but we're looking forward to working with the Trump administration on, on finding somebody else. Well, what does that person look like? It is, and so in that instance, I do think that my political background does come into play, so,
sure.
From the standpoint of many of the articles that have come out since then, former Delaware Republican Party chair, Julianne Murray, but the way that it's characterized is like, I'm not even a lawyer and not qualified, which just, pisses me off. I'm totally qualified for this, and have fought for Delaware hard.
Yes, we just saw most recently with the University of Delaware, you released the statement, and I felt like your statement was perfect with the suspect that's in custody, stating what a great job people did. We understood the legal side of everything, and I didn't see any partisan politics in the way the justice system was working in that, which I think is a win for Delaware. But I think what you highlighted early on with Ben, it sounds like you feel that we're in good hands. You trust, this appointment to move this over to him. And so that's excellent. I know Katie has some questions here. I just want to ask you kind of two things, and then I want Katie to jump in. In the statement that I put up earlier, you called the blue slip process, or blue slip tradition, let's just call it, flawed and politicized. I'm curious, what would you do to safeguard it? How would you replace it to ensure that home state input did not have partisan veto power the way it's set up? And the secondary part of that would be, I always like to think of it from two sides. If Delaware had 2 Republican senators who opposed a Democratic nominee, would you defend the blue slip use the same way that you oppose it now? If you could just summarize that.
Well, I would be the same whether either way. I think that the system, the way that it is set up right now, that it is an absolute bar is a problem. And so whether it's 2 Republican senators that are not okay with a Democrat or vice versa, the fact that you can't even get a hearing in front of the Judiciary Committee, I think is a problem. So I personally would like to see. I understand the tradition of the blue slips, and they have a purpose from the standpoint of. The theory is the U.S. attorney is the highest law enforcement person in the state, and the judges are the highest judiciary within the state. So I understand why the senators have input in it, but in my view, that you should still be able to come in and have your day before the Judiciary Committee. They can still weigh in. They can say, we oppose her, because for whatever reason, but I do not think that it should be an absolute bar, because that's not the process working. That's, you don't even get to engage in the process. And I think that more than anything is what's so objectionable about this. Now, somebody will come right back at me and go, okay, great. So you go to the Judiciary Committee and it's stacked with Republicans and you're going to get through. Maybe, maybe not. The Tom Tillises of the world, have made it very clear that even if they got rid of the blue slips, he would not pass on somebody if the home state senators were not okay with them. So there's still a check and balance in there, but it would give the nominee the opportunity to make the pitch, to answer the questions, to show. Can you, are you partisan or aren't you? Are you independent? What is your theory on things? And, I think that, bearing that out and seeing that is an important part of this process that is just not happening. And that, that to me is the biggest problem with it.
Yeah, Katie, I struggle with this because you figure, if a president all of a sudden were to have loyalists throughout all the different courts, Katie and I were talking about John Paul Mac Isaac earlier today, and he's going to be on the show again in a couple of weeks because he's finally able to speak. All of his court cases are behind him. But
Tell him I said hi. We definitely know each other.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a good friend of the show. I interviewed him very early on. He was telling me throughout the past couple of years about these judges that were Obama appointed, Biden appointed, that were throwing out his court case with malice. And as a result, he would owe all the legal fees that they were throwing at him from the other side, and they were bankrupting him. And the blue slip process, to me, could possibly be something that you could get out of the presidential loyalist type of movement of getting people installed. So that way, when the next candidate comes in and wins the presidency, it keeps that from. But it just seems so flawed to me right now. And, it's continuing the Delaware way, Katie.
No, it absolutely is. And I wonder, too, how frustrating it must be to have conducted your job so evenly keeled and then have the reason why you're not being nominated because of politics. I know you touched on it a little bit when talking about New Jersey and Alina about how it's a blue state, but it does feel like that's kind of the exact same thing that happened here.
Oh, no, I would agree. And it's funny because the replay of my statement, the sentence that gets replayed the most too. One is, I naively believed, and they say it like it's a dig, and it's like, hello, I chose that word on purpose. Do you honestly think that I would put something in a statement that, but it was naive in terms of, but I wanted it to be a dig too. You should be able to be judged on the merits. Yeah, and particularly in a U.S. attorney position, which is by definition not allowed to be a political position. So everybody knows I was the chair of the Republican Party and I resigned because you can't, because of the hat check, you can't engage in politics. So you have to completely purge yourself of all politics. If you've had any in your, in your life, you have to purge yourself from it. And I then am not chosen because of politics. It's like, it's this vicious thing that kind of comes around. No, it absolutely, it's very frustrating to see that happen.
And it seems like the reason why, or the main reason why it had, is because, Donald Trump did handpick you. He hand appointed you for that. I know the audience would be super interested to hear, how did that feel to be hand chosen by a sitting president? And why do you think that he did choose you?
Okay. No, it's a really kind of a funny story. So I get a phone call. I mean, I worked my contacts. I worked lots of contacts, to kind of get there. And I get a phone call in June, and they ask me if I can come to the White House. And I like, sure. And they said, you're going to interview with, at this point, it was Sergio Gore, who was the head of the Presidential Personnel Office. They said the PPO. And in my mind, I'm going, what is that? Googled it. I was like, okay, now I understand where I'm going. Okay, fine. So I go to the White House, and I'm downstairs kind of at the garden level, right outside the Situation Room. I don't know that, but the guy that's sitting next to me is like, so have you ever been here before? And I'm like, no. And we strike up a conversation. And this was right in time with when they made the decision about Iran. Okay. So I didn't know it. They were all in the Situation Room. So I'm sitting on the couch, just kind of killing time. Door opens, everybody stands up. And I was like, I've been in a lot of courtrooms. I will stand up. I stand up, and President Trump walks out and walks right in front of me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and he looks at me and he goes, how are you today? I'm fine, sir. How are you? And off he goes, and it was the same day actually that because he had the yellow tie on, that he did the flagpole, that he went out and talked to everybody. So, I sit back down, and then, JD Vance comes out, PK said, so all of them are in the Situation Room. And I'm like, okay, I've already this is like bucket list, this is unbelievable. So they take me upstairs, they come and get me and take me upstairs. I don't know where I am. And I'm sitting in this much more elaborate waiting room, and Charlie Kirk walks in. And Charlie Kirk, I had just rerun for the chairmanship because I wasn't sure what was happening with this. And Charlie endorsed me. And we had, we had met several times. Turning Point was wonderful with a bunch of the grassroots Republican chairs and national committeemen and committee women. So I walked over and just started talking to him. And then we talked for a few minutes. He's busy. I go back over. They come get me and they say, Miss Murray, we're ready for you now. And I'm behind this woman, and she says, hey, can you put your phone down here? Sure. And I said, do I need to take my Apple Watch off? I don't know. And she said, no, that's fine. And I'm following her, and I'm like walking through this, this kind of entryway. And she says, just so you know, you're getting ready to meet with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. And I looked at her and I said, thanks for the heads up, and I walk through the door, and he's off to the left behind the desk, and there's two women sitting there that he's in a meeting. And then the two couches that you always see are right there. And I walk in the door, and he looks up and he says, Julianne? Yes, sir. He said, I'm finishing up a meeting. I'll be with you in a minute. Make yourself comfortable. Okay. And I walk over and I sit down.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm trying not to just be fangirl. Like, I'm in the freaking Oval Office, I'm trying to just take it in. And on the couch across from me is Todd Blanche, who is number 2 at the DOJ, and Sergio Gore. So they introduce themselves. We're making small talk. And, one of them says, so how's Delaware? I'm like, it's Delaware, and just, and we're just kind of talking. And so the president finishes the appointment. He says, Julianne, come on over. And so I pick up my purse, and I don't remember what I had. I couldn't have had my purse. I don't remember what I had in my hand, but I kind of walk over, to the desk, and there's 3 chairs, and I'm kind of in the center one. And before I even sit down, an aide walks in and sets a glass down on his desk. And I looked at him, totally me, and I went, oh my God, is that Diet Coke? And he said, he was like, yeah, it's my Diet Coke. And I went, and is that the red button? And he was like, that's the button. And and so it was he's just so personable. Mm-hmm. And people, I met him a couple of times on the campaign trail, obviously, because I was the chair, but this was my first and only, opportunity where I'm sitting across from the President of the United States in the Oval Office. And we're just talking, and so he had my biography, like my picture is there. So when he saw me earlier, he knew, that because my picture was there, and in my biography, and he goes, a lot of people think really highly of you. And I said, well, it's wonderful to hear. And, we start talking. And he says, why do you want to be the U.S. attorney? And I said, I ran for attorney general. I said, I got close. I got better than 46% in Delaware, which is, a little over 12,000 votes is what I lost by in 22. I said, I've tried to change and help Delaware every way that I can. And I'm very passionate about public safety and law and order. And this would give me the platform to do that. I mean, I can carry out what needs to be done. I have really good relationships with law enforcement. I mean, I said it would be a really, really good opportunity, and he said, what are you doing now? And I said, I have a private practice. I do estate planning and stuff like that. And I said, I'm also the chair of the Delaware Republican Party. This is how connected he is. He says, didn't I call you a couple weeks ago and congratulate you? And I said, you did. Appreciated the phone call. And so we kind of keep talking. And I tell people he has this kind of Trump weave where he would turn and say something to Todd Blanche and talk about something. And then he would look back at me and he would say, please continue. And so the joke with my husband is, I'll say something and he'll go, please continue. But by the end of it, he looked at me and he goes, you know what? He said, I'm impressed. He goes, I like you. I think you're going to do really well. If you want the job, it's yours. Congratulations. And he reaches across and shakes my hand.
Wow.
I looked at him and I said, oh, I want it, and then he took out a challenge coin and gave me, and I'm telling you, the challenge coin is the size of the palm of my hand. It is the Mac Daddy of all challenge, and says, I don't give these to everybody, but I want you to have this. And I'm like, oh, I love it. And he goes, you know what? Here, have one of my pens. So he has the Sharpies that he signs with. He gives me one of his presidential Sharpies. It says the White House on it. So I'm holding him and he says, we should get a photo. Let's do a photo. Come on around. And so, I walk around the Resolute desk and, I still don't even have the picture that it takes so long to get them. But basically, the one where he's sitting and I'm standing next to him and we do the photo and he says to the photographer, make sure she gets it, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, he leans back in the chair and he looks at me and he says, you're going to do great. Congratulations. And I said, thank you, sir. I won't let you down.
That's a huge vote of confidence coming from him. Hearing you recant the story, did it feel like you were talking to the sitting president of the United States, or did it feel like you were just talking to a regular person that you would interact with just kind of in everyday life?
It's still the president of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, and part of that's the trappings of the office. I was in the Oval Office, so it's, but he is, what people don't realize, and the very first time I met him on the campaign trail, I was at a Turning Point event in West Palm, and I was the chair. And I said to him, I introduced myself, and we're doing the photo, and he said, how do we look in Delaware? And I was like, I said, well, I said I said for the primary, I said, you got no problem there. And I said, but listen, I said, as far as the general election goes, this is when Joe Biden was still in the race. I said, you have a shot in Delaware. And he looked at me and I go, I'm dead serious. I said, in 2020. You beat him on the machines in Delaware. I said, you lost because of vote by mail. And he said, okay. And I said, vote by mail is not, we don't have no excuse vote by mail in Delaware. And he said, why not? I said, because I sued when I was running for attorney general. It is not lawful in Delaware. And he was like, what? And so we kind of start this conversation. Secret Service is trying to just kind of push me along. And he's like, no, just wait a minute. I want to talk to her, and I got more, I had like 2 or 3 minutes. But when I walked away, I said to my friend, I said, he is so magnetic. There is just, he 100% engages with whoever he is talking to. You can see that, you can see it. And, people think that it is, an affect. No, that is really how he is. He genuinely is a people person. And really cares about who he's talking to. And so to have that experience is, something obviously, I will always treasure, even if I'm not the U.S. attorney. To just know that I had that time with him was, was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That you can tell even just seeing him interact with people that he is so charismatic. And it's almost frustrating because as somebody who had been kind of middle of the fence independent my entire life until Donald Trump, even when he does or says things that I'm just like, oh, come on. It's like he's so likable. He's such a likable person. And you can kind of feel that charisma through the screen just when you're seeing him interact with some of the reporters, some of his staffers. You can feel kind of that. I know you said that he was asking how Delaware is looking. A lot of my followers wanted me to ask the question, does Donald Trump have an idea of the way crime is in Delaware?
I think he does. And I think that is actually why he put me in the position.
Okay.
I mean, it was, because I could obviously speak to it having run for office. I think he does. And, and I will say this about Ben. So Ben, I picked him. He went from line A USA. I made him my deputy. I mean, I think a lot of him. And so, I mean, the office Ben and I were very philosophically similar. I mean, similar priorities. When I told him that I wanted to do the gun program for Sussex County, he's like, I love it. We've never had a U.S. attorney that wanted to do that. I mean, he's a very prosecution-oriented prosecutor, and so I think that even though I'm not there, I think I've left it in good hands. But yes, I think Donald Trump knows that, that Delaware is a hot mess.
Well, it is a hot mess. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think is one of the biggest obstacles for fighting that hot mess in the state? And is there any changes you hope that maybe get implemented that could possibly fix the problem?
Well, I think that, we are a one-party state. And, and I think that, and for anybody out there, I'm going to be very general, because I can't engage in politics. I'm still working for the DOJ, but just kind of generally what I can say is I think one party rule either way can be a problem.
Absolutely.
And I think that, in terms of the electorate here, the making messages hit at home is a problem. Yeah, I mean, I think that we don't drill down. And the reason that Trump is as effective as he is he taps into people like the low propensity voters love him. And it's because they feel heard. I mean, he's a billionaire, but they feel heard. And so, I think that, in terms of just kind of generally, for here, we have to work to get our electorate understanding why things are the way that they are.
I do think that's why he got so many of the independent voters is because, and speaking as one myself, he does make you feel heard. There's a lot of things that for a very long time, if you would even talk about, you were kind of demonized for, and that goes for either way. That happens on both sides of it. But he does have a way of making you feel like your voice does matter. And what the everyday common person is concerned about is a valid concern.
But that's enough about politics.
Yes,
Got to be careful. Yep.
Without breaking confidentiality, I'm wondering what is one of the most surprising moments that you encountered in your time, whether it's a funny moment, whether it was just something that surprised you or not. I don't want you to say anything that you can't say, but is there a moment that sticks out to you that will probably be with you for the next 2 decades or so?
So like when I was the U.S. attorney?
Yes.
Okay. Well, one of the it's kind of funny and that is that it was very early on, and I was talking to somebody within the office about something, and she said something, and I said, well, that's above my pay grade. And then I stopped and I went, oh, I'm the top of the office. Like I am the final say on what happens. And it was one of those really kind of funny eurekas that I knew I was the U.S. attorney, but those phrases that we say, oh, it's above my pay grade. And all of a sudden it was like, well, the buck stops right here, and then the other thing that I think will really stick with me, is that, the respect. I mean, so, as I met different law enforcement agencies, I was ma'amed everywhere, and I'm always, I've always in Delaware been Julianne. I mean, it's just, that's, and that's just how I am. But, the ma'ams and the respect that went with that everywhere I went was something, again, that I found it was very humbling, and an honor. And, and that is something that, that will never be taken away. And that I will hold.
Does the surrealness of being in a role like that, especially I imagine here in a small state of Delaware where everybody kind of already knows you, does that surrealness ever go away? Or is it something you found yourself feeling all throughout your term? I
found it all throughout the term.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really did. So our building is the Hercules building in Wilmington, and it's, it's a corner office with windows on both sides. It's just this beautiful, every day I walked in, I was like, this is just amazing. Yeah. I also, to be perfectly candid, also knew that there was a chance it would come to an end. I mean, so I went into this knowing that there was a chance that I wouldn't be held over. I mean, just statistically, I knew that was a chance because there are people like, you shut down your law firm? I was like, oh, I went all in. I mean, when the president of the United States says, hey, I want you, yeah, I'm going to do that. Yeah. But I mean, so there was always in the back of my mind a little bit of, gee, I hope I get to stay here for sure. And, but I can also say that, and it was so interesting because once I knew what was happening and, Ben's office was right next door to mine. And I said to him once I said, I'm going to go ahead and move out. And he's like, well, don't be in any hurry. And I was like, you're the U.S. attorney. Like, yeah, I'm going to move. I said, but besides, it's freaking freezing in this office because of the windows. I said, your office is warm. I'm out, buddy. And so like I moved down the hall, and when I came in on Monday, he hadn't moved everything out. So I'm like, let's move you, and part of that was I also just wanted everybody to take a deep breath. I think everybody's kind of been like, this is weird. She was the U.S. attorney and now she's the executive assistant U.S. attorney. This is weird. And I wanted everybody to just kind of, realize that I was okay. Right. Did I cry about all this? Oh, you bet. I mean, like, this has been devastating.
Absolutely.
But Ben came to see me today, and I said, see, you're coming to see me. He's like, your office is so warm. I was like, I told you. Like, he's like, you were kidding. But no, I mean, it is, sure, it's, it's been, heartbreaking for sure. But I also, I'm very happy with how, if it had to turn out this way, I'm happy it's been, because I feel like the office is in good hands. Yeah. And I am happy with my decision to control my own destiny. Mm-hmm. And to not wait around. When we told the office, Ben said to everybody, he said, what everybody here needs to understand is she didn't have to do this. The other acting U.S. attorneys are staying in their positions. I voluntarily stepped out. And I did it because I don't want to jeopardize. I knew. So basically, if we started getting legal challenges, our office ends up defending them. So now I'm taking assistant United States attorneys offline, for the purpose of, of engaging in appeals or whatever, to work on defending me as the U.S. attorney. So what work isn't getting done if you're doing that? Not to mention that if for some reason it really were held that it was, that it was fatal to an indictment. I mean, take the UD case. Imagine, if something happened with that, it were found that I was not validly, appointed, and that case goes away. I just couldn't do that. And
Julie, so I think that's very commendable. That's very commendable that you put that first, because I know there's so much going on in Delaware, and especially you bringing that case up, that's so important that gets seen all the way through the correct way. And I know that all of the people that are watching this right now probably echo that sentiment, that it's very commendable that you took yourself out of a position that probably meant a whole lot to you to protect the integrity of the office.
I did.
Julianne,
but I can live with that. I mean, that's, that's one of those, it was the right thing to do. Not everybody does it. But for me, I mean, I as disappointed as I am with the, how the process played out, at the same time, I mean, I held my head high. I have nothing to, that I did wrong or to be embarrassed about, or I did everything the way that I was supposed to. And so, I mean, I think that will follow me while I figure out kind of what that next step is going to be.
Julianne, I thought of a question as you were talking about kind of like the invalidation of the office. Mm-hmm. If actions that you took over these past several months were deemed by the courts to be invalidated, who bears the responsibility? Is that you? The Department of Justice leadership, the White House? I never even thought about this, but like if somebody says that something under your tenure happened and they're like, hey, we're going to invalidate that, who's responsible?
Well, when you say who's responsible, who's to blame or who has to fix it? Or
who's going to have to fix it? I mean, I'm sure the blame they'd throw directly on you because you're the person out. Like, I understand that, but like, how's that get fixed?
Well, I mean, the reality is that in all indictments and all actions, it's the United States of America. So so at that point, it's the Department of Justice. And so on something like that, it would be the DOJ would be working through and how to remedy it.
Right. No, I appreciate it. It was one of those odd questions that came to my head as we're talking and going through all this.
Yeah.
There's been tons of comments. I just want to tell everybody, as I've not been putting them up, a couple of people actually had some legal stuff. I don't want to be airing legal things in the middle of our interview, but I will make sure that it gets to Julianne so that Julianne can see it. So you have my word that we'll forward those comments over so they can be addressed, to know that you've been seen. I really appreciate your time coming on with Katie and I in what's really a turbulent time too, I'm sure, of kind of, I can't even imagine, like you get to the highest of highs and then you have to make such a really a bold decision with integrity. So I think that you definitely have handled that with grace. And even in this interview and explaining everything, it helped clarify things a lot more for me, I'm sure for Katie and for everybody who's listening. I would be amiss if I didn't ask, and you can say you're not allowed to talk whatsoever about this. Yep. But Katie and I have been working on a very high profile case that's across your desk. And I just want to ask you, as far as, when it comes to the protection of the public, current case that might be on your desk and in courts right now, with University of Delaware and terrorism, how confident are you in our legal system here in Delaware in getting the right thing through with our FBI and Newcastle County Police and what they've brought forth? Do you feel good about the prosecution forward?
I do.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that the quality of the law enforcement in this state, and one of the, again, kind of the hallmark of Delaware is that the egos. I mean, you hear so many stories in other jurisdictions about ego and and territorial stuff, and that UD case is the poster child of no ego and everybody just kind of putting collaborating and figuring it out. And so I think that I'm happy that I was able to enhance that. I think that that's actually going to stay as part of the office. That's certainly my goal, is to keep it that way. But no, I mean, our law enforcement really works together. High quality, integrity. Right. Yeah, I have confidence.
Yeah, I normally don't tiptoe around conversations like this, but I feel it's important given the fact that it's an open case. I don't want to ask anything. So I appreciate it.
Was a very general question about what I think about our law enforcement.
Yep, I tried to.
Yeah.
Can I ask you another question on your opinion as well on something? And I don't mean this from a political standpoint at all, but I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. There are a lot of major changes right now happening in Delaware. Off the top of my head, the Reading Consortium, that's a major possible change happening to all Newcastle County school districts pretty much. Multiple hyperscale data centers, the tax reassessment. I mean, the list really goes on and on. I'm wondering if you think, again, not politically, is Delaware on the right trajectory? And if not, is that trajectory correctable?
I don't know that I can really answer that.
Yeah, I'm actually going to tell you, Julianne, do not answer that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's something that I don't think in your current position you can answer.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's me being a good host here, keeping all of us safe.
Yep.
Absolutely. I don't want to get into the politics side since you still have your position where you're at.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah. Sorry, Katie, not to pull that one down.
I'll sidebar it.
Yeah. I would actually, after the conversation, we're done being live here in a few moments. I would love to talk to you for a few moments. So if you can hang around in the back room here before we sign out, that would be absolutely wonderful. And I'll let Katie take it away here.
Oh, that's all I have. Julianne, I'm so thankful. So thankful for your time. So thankful that you gave us an interview like this. I know that you're a little bit familiar with my content, but my content is for the everyday person in Delaware. My goal is to try to get people involved in politics and kind of understand that local politics is the most important thing that affects their life. And I've noticed that there's just so many people that are so busy in the everyday grind that they don't have time to understand things.
Yep.
So what I've been trying to do is learn myself, because I just usually covered true crime. I threw myself kind of in this spectrum when I noticed some things that were happening. And I realized by talking to people that nobody else kind of understood them either, especially not on an everyday person level. So I'm really thankful that in everything that you've explained tonight, you've broken it down so eloquently so everybody can kind of understand and truly grasp the concept of what happened and how the entire process works.
No, I'm happy to do it. And if you find that you end up with, a lot of questions and you want to do a follow-up, I'm good with that. I mean, I really care about Delaware, and have put a lot of myself into it. I mean, I think that the past 5 years for sure, it has been a lot, but I am passionate about it. So, and making people understand teaching is something that it matters to me. So I'm happy, if you guys have additional stuff that you need.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, everybody, that's our interview with Julianne Murray. Hopefully you got some of your questions answered here. Katie, that was excellent.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it.
She answered most of them. I'm sitting here looking at my sheet the whole time because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. And every time I'm like having to go down on my list because they're already being
I know she was
answered,
covering it as we went. I was like, this is great.
That was amazing.
But we already know you're a pro, Julianne. Yeah. Thank you so much.
No problem.
All right, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow night, right?
Tomorrow.
We got a great show for everybody. We have some national people coming in. We have investigative reporter George Webb, who led the investigation in Butler, PA, and now he's leading the Charlie Kirk investigation. We also have Victor Neves from the Gateway Pundit. He's the president right now of a pro-life organization who'll be talking to us. And we have Taylor, who works with James O'Keefe Media, who will be joining us from the border to talk about border issues, what's going on and how that could possibly be affecting Delaware. To join in with us, it will be Katie and I tomorrow night. You'll join in at 7 p.m. live right on all of your socials, and we'll be streaming to podcast after the fact. For Katie and myself, thank you, everybody. It's been a great night. Take care.
See ya.
Reclaim ground media, we're taking back the sound, lifting up the truth until the walls come down. Voices for the kingdom, hope in every town. This is where the lost get found. On